All right, gang, I am off to go see Ben-Hur.
Are we having fun now, brother? Stand and fight! Stand up now!
Now, I frankly have lost track over how many versions of Ben-Hur have been made over the last 100+ years. I mean, of course, this particular film, I guess you could say, is a remake of the iconic and cherished 1959 film with the Heston. But then again, the 1959 film was also a remake. So, I mean, there's been, I think, 4 or 5 versions of Ben-Hur adapted from the late 19th century novel of the same name. But, you know, every time, you know, Hollywood engages in yet another, I guess, potentially unnecessary remake, I'm always like...
God, help me.
And basically whipped into a state of self-pity and apathy. In particular, when I hear that they're going to remake legendary Charlton Heston films, my gut reaction typically is... But I got a little more, my interest got a little more piqued when I heard that director Timur Bekmambetov, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, is a director at the helm. And you know what? I really enjoyed his Wanted. I thought that was a really sensational action film. And I am a stone cold apologist for Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Why didn't Ben-Hur have the promotional tagline from the director of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter? Clearly the most historically accurate film about American president ever made. Enough of the chit chat. I'm on my way to the cinema. I'm going to screen this bad boy opening night. I will be back with my obligatory review. All right, gang, I just got out of Ben-Hur.
How long were you a galley slave?
5 years.
What is your name?
Judah Ben-Hur.
I really like historical sword and sandal action film epics. I've always been a big sucker for them. And, you know, when they're done really well, there is nothing better. But, you know, when they're done piss poorly, there's nothing more monotonous and wasteful. Now, this, of course, takes me into this Ben-Hur, and I really didn't go into this film with a lot of big expectations, but I gotta say, it is shockingly unsucky. That may not sound like a strong ringing endorsement, but I honestly was expecting far worse. And I'm not going to really bore you with the details of the story, because I think anyone who is a modest film fan and who's also seen the 1959 original with the Heston.
Back to your place! Back to your place!
Basically knows the underlying story is set during the time of Jesus, and is basically about 2 brothers, albeit adopted brothers and not blood brothers, who one being a Jewish prince, who is Judah Ben-Hur, played by Chuck Heston. The other is ends up being a Roman soldier, played very well by Toby Kebbell. And through a series of tragic circumstances, they find themselves horrifically divided on ideological levels, and eventually become sworn enemies.
My family was one of the most respected in Jerusalem. Welcome home.
Please, I need you to tell me who our enemies are.
Masala, I won't name names until we were betrayed.
This, of course, is really an ultimate tale of seeking revenge and then later redemption, I guess.
If your brother is the pride of Rome, defeat him and you'll defeat an empire. Then you will have your vengeance.
On a positive, the performances by the lead actors are very well done. No one is ever going to be able to re-encapsulate the level of movie star bravado and chemistry and a larger-than-life stature that Charlton Heston at his peak brought to the table when he played Ben-Hur. I mean, that would be laughable to suggest otherwise. Jack Huston, he is a really charismatic and inviting presence in this film, and I think he acclimatizes himself rather well to a role that, quite frankly, carries a lot of baggage with it. Toby Kebbell is also a real fly-in under-the-radar actor, because I think he is one of the better actors that's not particularly well known. I mean, he's well known in film circles in the sense that he is you know, maybe second fiddle to Andy Serkis in terms of motion capture performers. I mean, he was really great in his motion capture performance in the Planet of the Apes films, the 2 recent ones, as well as his superlative work in the recent Warcraft film, Playing an Orc. He arguably gave the best performance in that film, human or not. And I like the way the film and his performance really made Masala kind of a conflicted antagonist in this film. He's not pure, unbridled evil, as he is a character that has a lot of forces conspiring against him to do evil deeds. So I think on paper the character is written particularly well, and Toby Kebbell is really strong in the part.
Masala! You know we've done nothing wrong. Rome's calling for blood. Crucify them. No!
I liked also Rodrigo Santoro as Jesus. He's arguably kind of the most GQ looking Jesus that I can recall. But I like the way the film introduces Jesus, you know, as a kind of a nonchalant carpenter, just doing some carpentry things, taking a piece of wood and making something out of nothing. And I think that's pretty cool. I like the working man Jesus introduction in this film. And
love your enemies. God is love. He has a path for you.
If he's already decided my path, how am I better off than a slave?
Why don't you ask God?
He's sprinkled throughout the narrative. Like in the original 1959 film, he's really this omnipotent, this ethereal force of good that inspires good in others. And they give Jesus more of a face in this film, so that's commendable. When it comes to other performances, though, the trailers have really gone on sort of ad nauseum to mention, to reveal that Morgan Freeman is in this film, and I think that this film desperately needed some star power to help sell it. And Morgan Freeman, he is one of our greatest living actors. There's absolutely no question of that. But he looks funny in this movie. He's like wearing this horrible dreadlocked wig, and he looks kind of comatose through the whole movie. He looks like he's just sort of sleepwalking through the part. And I love Morgan Freeman to death, but this is just got paycheck roll written all over it, and he's barely delivering a performance here. I don't want to say it's embarrassing, but I mean, it reaches a point where it's like they could have got any actor for this small but important role as far as the story trajectory for Ben-Hur goes. But watching Ben-Hur, I always was thinking of something that Howard Hawks, I believe it was Howard Hawks, the famous director, once said about his definition of what makes a great film. And a great film is one that has 3 great scenes and no bad scenes. Ben-Hur has 2 absolutely stupendous sequences, and of course the first one is the gallows sequence, during which time we see Ben-Hur enslaved in a gallows along with all the other prisoners, methodically rowing the Roman war vessels. And Timur Bekmambetov, he knows how to harness these sequences. It is a tour de force spectacle of visual ingenuity and sound design and editing, and I thought it was quite exceptionally well rendered.
Their laws.
And then, of course, the second great scene in the film is the chariot sequence. And the chariot sequence in the first Ben-Hur is arguably one of the most famous, if not infamous, action sequences of the movies. I mean, the making of that sequence has its own inherent history and mythology of it in its own right. And trying to duplicate that sequence but somehow give it a fresh and modern spin, I think is probably not only a difficult task but a thankless one. But it is undeniably gripping and exhilarating, and I think Bekmambetov pulled it off remarkably well, and I certainly wasn't bored by it, that's for sure. And
should have stayed away.
You should have killed me.
I will.
and you did feel the tension between Masala and Ben-Hur, and again, that speaks towards the really good performance chemistry between Huston and Kebbell. And they really create this effective 1-2 performance dynamic that works really well in the film. I wasn't expecting that in this movie to be as well acted by the leads as it ended up being. You know, another thing that this film really has going for it is it has a very strong lived-in and natural-looking production artifice. I was really worried with Timur Bekmambetov going in that this was going to be really heavy on CGI overkill and artificiality, and surprisingly the film makes great use of what I'm assuming is good location shooting as well as practical sets. I mean, there's obviously some computer-generated imagery, especially in the gallows sequence, but it never overwhelms the film to the point where it becomes really obtrusive. Unfortunately, I can't say that there's no bad scenes in this movie because there are some dialogue sequences that are really awkwardly handled. There's also a few key subplots that are really wobbly in execution, and the film's final 5 minutes are, I would say, shockingly and sloppily engineered and executed. The film really was building towards this impactful conclusion, and then it all comes unraveled in this final 4 or 5 minutes where it looks like it's the product of some haphazard post-test screening, maybe editing, and it doesn't flow really well. It doesn't make logical sense, and I found it kind of laughable, and I just left the screening thinking, that's how they ended the film in that particular manner. It didn't feel right at all. I gotta say that I liked a considerable amount of Ben-Hur. I think it's never dull. The two great action scenes that I mentioned are exemplary. I think the performances by Kebbell and Huston hit all the right notes. I think the film suffers from a really shoddy final 5 minutes. This is also a movie that could have benefited from being maybe a little bit longer to expand upon the story. I'm sometimes a really harsh critic when it comes to films that go on way too long, but I think of a film of this scale and scope, it really could have benefited from being longer than 2 hours and 5 minutes. I think maybe the story of Ben-Hur maybe would almost be more beneficial if it was given like a long miniseries treatment on HBO, for example. Anyway, there's my review of Ben-Hur. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the film if you saw it. Let me know what your thoughts are on the original 1959 Ben-Hur, and again, for all the good things that are in this movie, it would be absolutely laughable to going to eclipse the rather large shadow that classic film casts on this one. Thank you very much for watching my review. If you could like this video, I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you could subscribe to my channel, that would mean the world to me. Have yourself a wonderful evening, and I'll see you at the movies, everybody.